Ohana Apprentice Sorcerer. Here we find him going on an adventure. Really? Yeah, there are a lot of ways we can build an Izzet Spellslinger deck, but I bet you didn't expect us to try and do it with an adventure strategy, now did you? I didn't. I ended up doing it this way. Is it better? I don't know. It's cheap. See, what I find Izzet usually ends up being is like a singular path, winning with like Group Drain, a Storm thing, or like a bunch of little Talrand tokens. So I ended up making a deck that does all that, but it also does more with the idea of adventure close at heart. So a good chunk of these cards I put in here have a small separate little text that you can cast, and then it just hangs out in exile until we want to cast the full version. That's pretty nice. There are a few ways of Magic for our opponents to actually affect our things in exile, like Wilds of Eldraine just printed a few, but we can pretty much rest easy that they're not going to be able to touch anything that we put in there. So it's essentially a free second hand that they can see, but no touchy. So let's get into what we can do with the Ohana Apprentice Sorcerer. For 2, a blue, and a red, you get a 2/5 legendary creature Human Wizard with. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. It's pretty nice. And once each turn, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from the top of your library. You still have to pay the costs, timing rules still apply. So we can't cast sorceries at instant speed, unless we can. First, let's just go over what I mean by adventure cards with an example of them. We got Sword Coast Serpent. It's a 5 generic and 2 blue 6/6 creature serpent dragon. With Sword Coast Serpent, can't be blocked as long as you've cast a non-creature spell this turn. It also has an adventure, and that's a little clause named Capsizing Wave. For 1 and a blue, you get an instant adventure with return target creature to its owner's hand. Then you exile this card, and you may cast the creature later from exile. The creatures and enchantments that you find that have adventures on them, those cards aren't instants and sorceries themselves. They're the creature or an enchantment. When it's, on the top of your library or in your hand or in exile or wherever else you're going to find it. Where it is an instant or sorcery is when you cast it on the stack. So if it allows you to cast instants and sorceries from the top of your library, well, that means you can cast your adventures from the top of your library as well. It's, remember, not checking if it's an instant or sorcery on top, it just lets us cast instants and sorceries from the top. Very big difference. You don't believe that this works, you can check the Gatherer page. But if you're already at that point, you can, you'll find it. I'll just post a little picture here. Have fun. It's interesting. Go for it. But it is important to keep in mind that you still can't cast the creature side from the top just because it's attached to an instant. You have to cast that instant or sorcery clause from the top of your library for it to work from the top of your library. To be honest, I started with 17 of these cards when I first made this deck. Now there are 28 adventure cards in the deck. A lot of the time, you're going to be getting a non-adventure card and none of your stuff triggers. So almost all of the adventure cards that I can run are in this deck. I think it's very seriously minus like 2 or 3. So if it's an adventure, it's in here if it costs 50 cents or less. So there's not a lot of great use cases for them because they're all really random. Oh, what's this? I'll make a treasure. It's not great. But they do still count as instants and sorceries, so we might as well hold on to them and use them when we can. What we mostly want to do with this deck is cast those adventures from the top of our library to get to the things that eventually get us the value from casting the things. So we get to our Talrands, we get to our young Pyromancers, we get to our other things. We'll talk about those later. Let's first talk about a few of our adventure cards, like Young Red Dragon. It's a 3 generic and a red 3/2 creature dragon with flying. It can't block. It's not great. It's a body that can't even block. Depending on the board state, it might not even be a good attacker. But the adventure is bathed in gold. For 1 and a red, you get an instant adventure with Create a Treasure token. That means you can pay 1 and a red to get a treasure, and then put a 4-mana flyer in the wings. See what I did there? And we can cast it anytime we really get a chance, so yeah. Essentially, these cards run like cantrips, because normally cantrips will just say, cast this, do this effect, draw a card. It does help get you through your deck faster, and your hand size never really goes down. These are kind of pseudo cantrips because it always gives you something to do. So they'll be just hanging out in exile, and then eventually you'll be like, I'm really feeling like casting my Young Red Dragon real quick. Bring it out, have some fun with it. See if anybody can stop it. Probably can. Thopters can stop it. That sucks. But it can't block Thopters. That also sucks. Those adventure cards aren't the important part. A lot of them just kind of do nothing. So what we will start running are things like Talrand Sky Summoner. Now I know somebody who does not like Talrand. Sucks to suck. Talrand's going in this deck. 50 cents or less. It's a 4-mana 2/2 Merfolk Wizard that makes a 2/2 Flying Drake whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. Oh, pretty good, right? Yeah, you'll see it everywhere. It's a blue staple when you're doing Spellslinger. So it's nothing like a flying army of Hotline Bling as a reward for casting our nonsense adventures. Or you can get Young Pyromancer, 2 mana, 2/1, Human Shaman. Makes us a 1/1 elemental every time we cast an instant sorcery. They're elementals, and they're good blockers. So like this Boy Scout just essentially makes you good surprise blockers for when you can and eventually will start casting off the top of your library. There are a lot more impactful creatures. A lot of them actually can be on your adventures. But for the most part, we just want to get to these things so that we get value out of casting our stuff. Now, I think that Rockside Sorcerer, that's not a Sorcerer, it's a Sorcerer. I clean the floorcers. I'm stupid. Now, I think that Rockside Sorcerer is going to be kind of a little bit better than this because it can pick off like damage with planeswalkers and players since it's just a 4-mana 3/3 human wizard with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, deals 1 damage to any target. So, see a small creature, kill it. Or you can just keep getting more things like Thermal Alchemist. It's a 2-mana 0/3 Human Shaman with Defender, can't attack, boo-hoo, but it can tap and deal 1 damage to each opponent. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you also untap it. It may seem really small in damage, but it absolutely increments, keeps pushing the game to an end, and honestly, once you get to the end of the game, it's super impactful. Or just double that amount of damage with Gutter Snipe. For 3 mana, you get a 2/2 Goblin Shaman with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, deals 2 damage to each opponent. Look at that. Little goblin fellow. What a mischievous little rascal, huh? Who goes? Look at that little guy. He's gonna kill everyone. Or we could just focus on the creatures with Balmore, Battle Mage Captain. You just pay a blue and a red for a 1/3 legendary bird wizard. It has flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, creatures you control get +1/0 and gain trample until end of turn. Yeah, it does that. Guess green isn't the only color that can steal abilities from others. Am I right? Anyway, it can buff your board and make sure the damage gets through, at least whatever is possible to get through. That trample is really important. Players usually block differently when trample's involved. Like, some people might be able to sacrifice a 0/3 to not take 6 damage, but would rather choose to take all 6 damage instead of losing a 0/3 and taking only 3. Keep that in mind. People get greedy once trample is involved. But just like the Cha-Cha slide, it's about to get funky. The first one I want to mention, because it won't stay this same price for long, is As Foretold. For 2 and a blue, you get an enchantment with, at the beginning of your upkeep, put a counter on As Foretold, time counter. And then, once each turn, you may pay 0, rather than pay the mana cost of a spell that you cast with mana value X, where X is less than the number of time counters on As For. Essentially, if there's 5 time counters on As Foretold, you get to cast something 5 or less for free. It has 3 time counters on it. You can cast essentially every adventure that's in your deck. Every single one. If you see it on top of your library, likely it's going to be able to be cast. But As Foretold is not going to stay 50 cents or less for long, but I have proof. When I put it in, it was 50 cents or less. It's okay. I'm putting it in. I'm keeping it in. It's cheap now. But, it's still inexpensive. I'm going to use it. So early bird gathers no moss. Here I am. We could also use Quark the Thumbless. Double your spells. First you pay 1 and a red. Then you get a 2/2 legendary creature Goblin Wizard with. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, return the spell to its owner's hand. If you win the flip, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. He also has Partner. Now he isn't our commander, so he will be alone forever with his beady blue eyes and his bald head. Now you might be thinking, hey, why would you want to play the chances and that your spells just don't get cast? Well, fear not. They still get cast. They just don't resolve. You kind of want him to return it to your hand. You cast something, it has to be cast to go on the stack, meaning all of your triggers trigger. You don't have any choice in that matter. Everything, all the creatures that came out, everything, bam, triggered on the stack. His ability, you want to resolve first. So those go on the stack, and then you say, hey, what's gonna happen? So you get his ability out, you flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it goes back to your hand and you can pay that cost again to get the value again. Or you can just get the wing claws that you have on Quark with Lucky Clover. Just a 2 mana artifact with whenever you cast an adventure spell, instant or sorcery, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Alright, so you win every flip. And even with Quirk, this will just mean that even if you lose the flip, you at least get one effect off. Win, 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 win. It's always a win. Or, I mean, just play Extraordinary Journey. It's a journey, so ordinary, it was extraordinary. For a double X and 2 blue, you can cast an enchantment that has a lot of text. So pause to read it if you really want to, but I'll go over the important part. The cliff notes right now is exile that many creatures, X, their owners can cast them again. So all magic ease to explain that again. But whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield after being cast from exile, you draw a card. Only do it once each turn, though. No cheating. This counts for you and your adventure creatures. So just, bolt a few problems, preferably tokens so that they never come back. Cast your adventures from exile, draw cards. Now that's pretty epic. And then finally, I want to talk about the utility lands. I got 2 interesting ones. The first one being Terrain Generator. For just 2, you get to tap it and put a basic land from hand onto the battlefield tapped. This also taps for 1 colorless mana, so it's essentially like tapping 3 lands to play an additional land at instant speed. Not a bad option. Secondly, we have Mad Blind Mountain. It's a land that I've used before. It's a mountain that enters tapped, and then you can pay a red and tap it if you have 2 or more red permanents to shuffle your library. A lot of times shuffling your library doesn't really matter. In this case, we can see what's going to be next, and if we don't like it, we can shuffle it. And I also have other lands like Shire Terrace. They can tap for a generic mana, but whenever we really need to, we can go and get a basic land and shuffle our library in order to get a better option on top, just like Mad Blind Mountain does. Unlike Mad Blind Mountain, once we use it, it's used, kind of done. But at least we have that option just in case we need it. If you want the full breakdown of the lands that I use and all the other cards that I didn't really mention in this deck, you can absolutely go into the link below. It's going to be in the description. Just keep in mind that the goal I did with this deck build was to keep it 50 cents or less. But if you have any good ideas or recommendations for it, leave them in the comments below. I do like to see what you guys have to say. And I do know that there's a lot of really good options. Just trust me, a lot of really good adventures that I wanted to put in here, but I couldn't because it didn't either A, fit in the colors, or B, didn't fit in my price range. The cost itself ebbs and flows, so I don't want to give you a definite price right now. But check the link in the description. I doubt it will ever go over 20 bucks unless, as foretold, really goes back up in price. This can get pretty powerful and pretty broken because you essentially have constant value that you can take advantage of no matter what you want to do. A bunch of the cards in this deck really do help you out, and with the amount of adventure cards that you do have, you essentially will never run out of things that you can do, at least bare minimum, just can do. But give them a shot. Check them out and see what you can do. That's all I got for you today. Go ahead and make sure that you like and subscribe. I just got to 50 subscribers. Pretty freaking epic. So thank you guys. And if you like this video, share it with a friend. See if they like it too. And hey, if this deck ain't for you, let me know what kind of decks you play. I play a lot of token decks. That's my thing. That's why there's a lot of tokens in this. I think this video would be the next best option for you if you're going to go anywhere. Since you made it this far already, you probably like me enough to check me out here. Or if you've listened to me, God help you. That's awful. But check out this video. It's pretty good. It's at least what YouTube thinks is pretty good for you. See you later. Peace.